So, hi everyone. My name is Gio. Here with the Beto camp. Just a volunteer. Here with Jared and Elle. Jared, say hi.
Hey, everybody.
Elle, say hi.
Hey, this is L.
Okay. So since we don't have Elle for that long, we're just gonna jump right into it. Elle, why did you choose Beto out of all the candidates?
Well, I'm a Texan, and so I'm familiar with him from his Senate run, and I supported him really strong during that, and I always just thought he was the right person for this moment. So when he lost to Ted Cruz, I really thought he should jump in, and I've just not really gotten, the other candidates haven't really jumped out at me. So I've just stuck with Beto.
Solid.
No, that's amazing. Well, you say you're a Texan. I'm from Iowa, and Jared, you're from South Dakota, if I remember correctly, right?
Correct.
So we obviously didn't have the full experience of the Senate run. So how was that being in Texas during Beto's Senate run?
It was amazing. Being a Democrat in Texas, it's always been kind of like it has felt like we've been kind of ignored by the party and just taken for granted. Like it's just taken for granted that Texas is a red state, so Democrats really don't put an effort here. And Beto really went, he went above and beyond, and it really it was different. He got me to care when before I was just kind of apathetic.
Well, yeah, no, that's amazing to hear. Jared, do you have any questions for Elle? Because we know Elle's busy and she's gonna have to leave here shortly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anything?
I guess my question would be, when Beto first announced for the Senate, he basically not a lot of people thought this campaign was going to go anywhere because Democrat in Texas not really going to have a chance. So I guess my question for Elle would be is, if you are able to define a moment where you not only thought that Beto had a chance of unseating Ted Cruz, but if there was a moment where you thought, man, this guy should really be president, is there a specific moment or a specific event that you can pinpoint that you drew those conclusions?
I spent a lot of time at the time in a very red county, and I remember early on in the Senate race, nobody thought he had a chance. It was like word was spreading around and stuff, but it was just kind of like another Democrat running in Texas. It's not going to happen. And then in that town, I started seeing people wearing Beto shirts, and that moment really stood out as just a wow. This guy is getting traction enough to get support in a really red area, and that was pretty cool to see. And I guess the moment I thought he was more than that he was possible presidential material was the first time I saw him do a town hall, do a rally thing out in Plano. And I was with my dad, and we both said it that it really seemed like he would make a good president.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. For us, we're obviously Midwest, so we didn't get Beto until just some months past. Well, Jared, if you don't have anything more for Elle, then I think we can let her go. She's at the fair right now. So,
I'll just say why. The biggest reason why I am drawn to him and his style, I guess I'll just like close on that, like, because it's what I've been thinking about all day, you know?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like it's really his approach to politics. You know, it's so different than what I'm used to, and like the way he's expressed it as like uh, he grew up and played punk in a scene called "Do It Yourself," and you know, I did the same thing. I was in a punk band and played music, and it was just something that, you know, gave me an outlet to, like, it was a bunch of like-minded people just be like getting involved, and he runs his political campaign that way, and it's like, you know, that's what we're doing right now. It's getting involved, and just like, it's not waiting for other people to do it. We're doing it, you know?
Right.
Yeah, no, that's that's a really different perspective, I think, from what both me and Jared have.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, El. I know you have to get back to your friends. They're probably getting a little mad at you right now.
Oh yeah.
Thank
But yeah,
thank
this
you
is
so much
cool.
for your time. Yeah, no,
Yeah, yeah.
it's amazing. We're gonna start to do this more probably here shortly. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I'll
Thanks
just
a lot, El.
let y'all go now.
Of course, of course. Okay, so Jared, any questions that you personally have for me?
Well, I I suppose this one kind of connects for both of us. You know, we're both born and raised Midwest, so like you said, we didn't have a lot of chance to get to know Beto during his during his Senate run. So I guess to say, how were you personally introduced to him? Like, when did you first learn of him?
So I think that the exact moment, I don't know, but I just recall that my friend Yasin, he's down in Texas, Tyler, Texas, and we've been really good friends for like 2 years now. And I remember that he was just at Bethel rally, and he was really working closely with the campaign, volunteering there. And he just messaged me one time. He was like, "This could be our next president. Look into the guy."
Ah,
And at that point, I was like, "Okay, well, yeah, sure." Like, a Texan Democrat is going to be like our next president, right? Because I was like, there's no way that like this is like really all that's hyped, right? And so I looked into it, and I specifically looked into kind of more of his immigration background because I am the son of two illegal immigrants that came from Mexico City.
huh,
So, you know, that was something that was really important to me, just kind of
of course.
his immigration policies. And I was like, wow, this is someone that really understands the struggle of immigrants and their story. And then I realized, oh, he comes from El Paso. That's why. So I like looked into him, and when he lost, my friend Yasin was like, "Hey, he's probably gonna run for president." I was like, "Sure, right?" So then he ran for president, and now here we are. Because none of the other candidates stuck out to me like Beto. None of them really struck a chord with me like him, and so that's why I'm here personally. But Jared, you're from South Dakota. You know, I know that it's a state that's also been very ignored from the Democratic Party. I have a friend
Oh
in
yeah.
South Dakota that ignores, like, well, he goes on rambles about how it's always ignored and how really no candidates go there. So how did
He's
Beto?
not wrong.
Yeah.
Uh,
How did Beto jump out at you then?
well, when I 2018 was really the year where I got really involved in politics. So when I Beto didn't jump, like, I hadn't known of him until 2018. So what really caught my attention from him was his viral speech about NFL players kneeling during the national anthem. And but around this time, I had been having discussions with my grandmother about this, who is very against the kneeling, the protesting, all that sort of stuff. And I found myself vehemently disagreeing. And when I caught this video of Beto, I found it to be a a very profound statement, and it was a deeper statement than I expected from a politician, especially an off the cuff answer like the one he gave. And he struck me just as a deep thinker and a very compassionate and passionate person. So I started paying more attention to him, and I started closely following the Senate race. I was very disappointed when he didn't win. It kind of broke my heart that night. Um, but his in his the content of his concession speech to Senator Cruz, I thought was incredibly inspiring and incredibly, as I said before, profound. So at that point, I said, if he decides to run for president, he's got he's got my vote from the start.
Yeah, no, that's that's amazing. I know a lot of people, my friends personally, that got wind of Beto during the Colin Kaepernick off the cuff response that went viral, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Well, another question that I will pose is, we're here in the Midwest. We're generally states, Iowa, obviously a lot less than South Dakota, that are more ignored by candidates because of the fact that we are just Midwest. We don't have that big of population. We don't have that many electoral college votes, and ultimately, especially for South Dakota, it's seen as you guys always go red. What is the point campaigning there? Why do you think that Beto will pay attention to our states if he were to be elected?
Well, I guess it would just kind of tie back to what he's been doing almost his entire political career. He's made quite a point of saying, he visited every single one of the 254 counties in Texas. Even from the biggest city to the smallest little town, no matter how red or how blue. And he's transitioned that mindset and that practice into his campaign. I recall, I can't remember what state it is. I think it was an East Coast state, Virginia or one of the Carolinas, where he went to a city that went almost 80% for Trump in the election, and he showed up anyway. And his crowd wasn't huge, and you could have expected that, but he showed up anyway because he wanted a message to spread, and he wanted to show that he is willing to listen to you no matter where you come from, no matter who you are. And if that is his mindset, as it has been these past few years, I have no doubt in my mind that he would pay just as much attention to Ruby Red, South Dakota, as he did to that small little town um, in Texas.
Of course. And, the county that you're referring to, Bland County in Virginia, that went predominantly
That's
for
it.
Trump. I remember seeing that he was going to go visit. A lot of my friends were saying, what is Beto doing? He's wasting his time. He's on the campaign trail. He can't be going to these ruby red counties. And Beto showed up anyway. So that to me, so other people, they say that it's lost time. And I think you also share this opinion. I think that it's talking to Americans, and that's what presidents should be doing right now.
Absolutely. Say as Beto said many times, um, no matter who you are, no matter who you voted for last time, Democrat, Republican, independent, he said, in his words, no me importa. It 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 doesn't matter who you are. You are an American first before you are anything else. And to him, that's all that matters. If you are willing to listen, he is more than willing to speak with you.
Of course. So Jared, getting on to the next topic, the steak fry here in Des Moines that
Uh,
happened a couple weeks ago. I know that you couldn't make it. Sadly, it was tragic. Me and Demarcus were there. We met up. We were really hyped to see you. sad that you couldn't come out. But I'm sure that you have now seen some of the news that came out from that. What was your opinion on it, and did you actually get around to hearing the speech at all?
Yes, I did. I followed the happenings of the steak fry throughout the day, mainly through Demarcus and through you as well. Um, you know, I was I was kind of in a emotionally down sort of place during that time because it just with the campaign and things and all of that, just the not so encouraging numbers and more outside personal stuff. But watching the turnout for Beto at that steak fry and seeing all of the enthusiasm that people had for him, and I heard stories from people who were there that after Beto's speech, supporters from all different candidates just came up to him and said, "Man, you were great. That was amazing," and it really it really lifted my spirits that day, seeing all of that enthusiasm and energy. In the campaign's own words, hell yes, all of that excitement. It really energized me to keep supporting Beto, and really energized me and convinced me that I'm backing the right guy. So I was very happy with the turnout at the steak fry and how excited everyone was. And it was, on a more personal note, it was very touching that Demarcus decided to do a little video for me with my canvassing buddy from here in South Dakota. So I was very happy following it all throughout the day.
Well, okay, so for those that don't know, I was here personally at the steak fry because I'm from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So, what I saw personally, since I was on the ground, I actually even joined Beto on stage, which was an experience unlike no other. I
I saw
saw
that.
different supporters from different groups. So I saw Buttigieg supporters just giving a standing ovation. I saw, Cory Booker supporters giving a standing ovation, Warren supporters, Bernie supporters. I saw what really was the makeup of America coming around, rallying around Beto. In spite of the fact that they were there for other candidates, they decided, you know what, this is a guy that speaks for us, and we saw that throughout the entire steak fry that, Beto was the first one to speak. And I think what a lot of people ignore from his speech is there was this reverend or this minister that came up before Beto to introduce Beto, and he's talked about Martin Luther King Jr.'s "Have a Dream" speech and how that speech was off the cuff. It was this woman that was telling Martin Luther King Jr., tell them about that dream. And I think that in that moment, Beto kind of threw out the pre-planned speech that he had, and he off the cuffed like his speech about I would be afraid if I were, like an immigrant in this country, if I had to go 300 miles to get the healthcare that I need to have a like abortion and stuff like that. I think that off the cuff response, that genuine, just Beto being himself and showing like what he is as a leader. I think that that's why all these other campaigns ended up just flocking to Beto and different organizers that were wearing Beto shirts. I remember as I was heading out, there was different organizers or different campaign supporters that were just like, "Hey, your guy did amazing. Really want to hear more from him."
Y-
So
Yeah,
that's
and
kind of the context.
yeah, and that off the cuff style of Beto's is I find to be one of the most endearing qualities about him is a because as we mentioned before, that speech about NFL players, that was completely off the cuff, yet it was still such a profound and meaningful statement. And Beto's ability to do that, I find to just be incredible. And all it does is, I know this comparison is thrown out all the time. It reminds me of Robert Kennedy when he was speaking in Indianapolis about the death of Martin Luther King Jr. That speech, there was no notes, there was no preparation. He just went up there and said what came to his heart and what came out of his mouth. And I think he and Beto really share that sort of ability, and it is one of the most impressive things about Beto in my mind.
Yeah, no, that's something that has really drawn me more and more to him. As some of my friends have ended up, pledging their support for other campaigns. They've obviously tried to get me to support their own campaign, whoever they're supporting. But I've stood firm in supporting Beto because I see that off the cuff, genuine nature, and I love the fact that it's not a pre-planned. This is it. Klobuchar, she's great. She's a great candidate. Amazing to have so many women in the field right now. But I have heard each time that I've heard her speak, I've heard the whole snow woman thing. And Warren, great candidate. Again, it's amazing that we have so many women candidate up in the field right now, and that's thanks to Hillary Clinton's paving the way for them, obviously. But
Absolutely.
Warren, I've heard the same speech from her now twice, and Kamala, I've heard the same speech from her now twice. Booker as well, I've heard the same speech from him now twice. And the fact of the matter is that Beto's genuine nature and ability to kind of see, this is the time that I should be off the script. And obviously as supporters, sometimes it frustrates us because it's like you're not on the script enough, right? But the fact that he's willing to go off the script and be genuine and listen to people is what really drew me to him as well.
Absolutely. And I kind of wanted a question for you. I've had a few personal experiences with Beto, just me and him. I wanted to ask you like personal one-on-one experiences have you had with him um as a candidate that really uh spoke to you?
Well, so I met him at the Hall of Fame dinner here in Cedar Rapids, which our group at the time, we it was very much makeshift. It was very much just like, yo, just get out here right now. Like there's a bunch of campaigns here, because it was still very early in the campaigning season. But I got to meet Beto, and I got to meet Beto and Amy, and it was amazing meeting them for the first time. He's a lot taller than I expected. That's definitely something. I'm 5'8", he's 6'4". There's
Oh shit!
obviously that difference.
I'm 5'8" too. It's really it kind of takes you back how tall he is.
It always does. Without any hesitation, I'm always just like, Jesus, Beto's tall. But like it was amazing. I told him, hey, I've been out here canvassing, calling for you, fund banking for you, and I want to see you elected. And he was like, that's great to hear. I'm so glad to have you on the team. Regular Beto style, just like praising his supporters, because when he looks you in the eyes and he's telling you thank you, you can really tell that he's genuinely grateful for your support
Oh,
and everything that
absolutely.
you do for him. And so he's like, get in here, let's get a family photo with like Amy and me and Beto. So I have that picture. The second time that I met Beto was it was in the Independence Day parade in Independence, Iowa. And this one stuck out to me a lot more because my mom was there with me. It was the first time I had brought her to one of these events, one of these campaign events. And my mom, she's just a permanent resident. So right now, currently, my dad is deported, which I don't think that a lot of people know about that. But my dad is deported, and we have been fighting a long legal battle to get him back to the United States, to get him his permanent residency. And my mom has her permanent residency, which we had to get through a long legal battle preceding that as well. So when my mom met Beto, the thing that she wanted to ask him about was his immigration policy. What are you going to do for us immigrants? And without any hesitation, any fear, she goes up to him. She's like, what are you going to do for us immigrants? And Beto said, you know what? I will tell you what I'm going to do for you guys, but tell me your story first. And that to me just really stuck out to me because it was, here you have my mom. She's desperate to finally have my dad back, to have my brother have status because he's a dreamer, and to, be a citizen, participate in this country in the full light that she should have a right to participate to. She was here in this country since she was my age, 18, and she's now 36. And so the fact of the matter is that she came up to Beto desperate, and Beto told her, "Tell me your story." And I've never heard a candidate just outright sit back and listen. And just then, after my mom talked his ear off for a little, he told her a little bit about his policy, what he wants to do, and then finally, a staffer had to pull him away because he was taking too much time.
That sounds like him.
Yeah, that just the genuine want to hear Americans, and not just Americans that have votes, but Americans in general, and benefit this country in the best way that he can. That to me was just embodied in that moment.
Right. And first of all, I want to say I wish you absolutely the best of luck with you and your father and your family. Heart goes out to you. I'm praying
But
for you.
thank you so much. Yeah.
Um, and what you described is, I think, another one of Beto's best qualities. When you meet him and when you speak to him, you're not just another face in the crowd of supporters. You're not just another vote that he needs to get. You're a person, and you know, he did that with me. I don't know. You might have heard this story, but uh, during the summer, I was out canvassing for him, and I had a very bad experience with a very angry person, and I was very shaken up. I was very emotional. And Cynthia reached out to me on Twitter about it, and lo and behold, not even an hour later, Beto calls me, and before he says anything else, he says, "I want to hear what happened." Uh, and I think that's really profound of him, because he doesn't want to give you some whole spiel. He doesn't want to give you, oh, why you should vote for me. It's, I want to hear what you have to say before I respond to anything. And I think that is so, it made me feel like I wasn't just some random kid in a random 18-year-old kid in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. He made me feel like I was a part of something, uh, and I found that uh, very heartwarming and very inspiring of him to do that.
Course. And I was one of your followers by the time that happened to you, and I'm so glad that Beto reached out to you. It reaffirmed the fact that I'm volunteering and I'm working for the right candidate.
Absolutely.
Well, so recent events. I guess we should get into that.
Uh-huh.
So we had the gun safety forum. Obviously things went fantastic. But there was the Buddha judge and Beto brawl, if that's what you want to call it. That went
Back and
down.
forth.
So, yeah, exactly. So what is your opinion on the whole matter? Besides just obviously the fact that we aren't for Buddha judge, just everything that you think about the back and forth.
Well, like, I haven't paid as much attention to Pete Buttigieg, and that's nothing against him. I've just been so focused on Beto. The other candidates have kind of been pushed aside. So I do not have the same sort of I do not have the same knowledge of Pete Buttigieg as the Twitterverse does.
Of course.
But and I agree with Beto that I I don't have much doubt that Mr. Buttigieg wants to get to the right place on gun violence. Of course, all of the candidates do, and that's not something I will ever fault them, is not caring about it. That being said, I did find Mr. Buttigieg's shiny object comment to be a little callous. Whether or not he meant to come off that way, I don't know. But considering who he was speaking to, especially the the people from March for Our Lives, where a cornerstone
course,
of their
of course.
plan is a mandatory buyback system. And for him to say to them that it is a distraction, um, I did find it to be very callous. And I think it was right for Beto to say, how the hell can you say that in front of them? You know, and I was having a conversation with the Pete Buttigieg supporter about this. The supporter was very respectful. He was very kind. We had a great conversation, and he started. And but one thing he mentioned was, you know, uh, a voluntary buyback system polls better than a mandatory buyback system, so we should just focus on that. And for me, that just kind of played into what Beto was saying with looking at the polls before deciding to do what is right. And you know, I think I think Beto was right to call him out on what he said, because he is absolutely right that mandatory buybacks have over 50% support in America at the moment. And if we cannot, there cannot be waiting at this point. We cannot afford to wait. People's lives are at stake here. And as of right now, I have been given no indication that Republicans in Congress, the president, are moving anywhere on this issue, despite what Mr. Buttigieg says. So, um, in my
Well,
mind,
okay. So just carrying off that, we did have the comment that from Buttigieg saying that at the very least Republicans are pretending to do something on gun control, which was before this whole spiel, obviously. But continue.
um, yeah, and that's kind of the issue with what I've taken with Mr. Buttigieg's position. No, the Republicans are at least pretending to be interested, so we should take them at their word. I'm sorry, no. They have given me no indication that I should take them at their word. And as I said, we should not, just as Beto says, we should not wait for polling to push us to do the right thing. No matter how hard it might seem or how messy it might seem, the right thing is the right thing. So we shouldn't trim our sails uh, just because of what the Republicans might do. And Mr. Buttigieg said this himself back in July, I believe. They're going to do the same things and call us the same things to us no matter what we do. So why should we care? I guess I would just call him Mr. Buttigieg to say, why aren't you taking that position now?
Of course. So carrying off of your point, I might have a very different perspective on this than you do. I'm Hispanic, and we know what happened in El Paso. We had a shooter there that drove over 600 miles specifically to kill people that look like me, and that to me was
Yes.
terrifying. It was terrifying. My mom is still afraid every time that I go to campus, to my classes, and I myself am still very much afraid and shaken up by that. I go to pride groups to support pride groups. I'm an ally and an adamant ally of pride. I go to all these groups to kind of just show solidarity with my fellow minorities. And yeah, it seems like as I do that, I'm painting a bigger target on my back. And so the fact of the matter is that hearing that whole it's a shiny object, we can't get distracted. I think that really just embodied to me the fact that there are those in our party that are comfortable with people still getting shot down and gunned down in the streets, so long as it is not their friends or family that are personally affected. You had these students from March for Our Lives that had numerous classmates that the next day they went in and they just weren't there. We know what happened in Parkland. They had to bring in how many service dogs just to calm them down, to even be able to get them back into the classrooms. And we know just the PTSD that's set in for them, and just the PTSD that seems to be underlying America right now. We had New York City, where in I believe it's Times Square, a motorcycle gasket fired wrong, and
And
then
everyone started
everyone
running. Yes.
exactly. And so I think that it is a very callous comment, but I think that it also comes from a place of ignorance from Buttigieg. Beto, he himself wasn't for mandatory buyback, and that's something that a lot of people will call him out on, right? But it took having that personal experience, having his home of El Paso, um, being seen as no longer safe, and having also the responsibility that he feels to his home weighing on him to finally push past what the polling says and what everything says, and to really just get to his genuine want and desire to do the right thing. And what Beto chose was the right thing, is to not just outright ban these weapons of war that have been known for gunning down multiple civilians, and any number of mass shootings that have occurred in this past year alone, but also to get them off the streets, the ones that are already in circulation. And I think that that is smart. I 100%, I will give credit where credit is due. This is a much bigger conversation than it was just 2 years ago. The gun safety.
Absolutely.
It's amazing that we have all these activists now. I'm very grateful that I know myself a couple of March for Our Lives, Iowa activists here. But the fact of the matter is that when you disparage these activists and you tell them that this is just a shiny object and that we should focus on what we can get past right now, well, your job as a leader is to push the boundary of what we can do. It was John F. Kennedy that said, we're going to get to the moon in this decade. And, no one thought it was possible, but he pushed that boundary and he did it. And, we're the first country to make it onto the moon. And yes, the moon hoax is not real, guys. We got there. But the fact of the matter is that it takes a leader to really say, we're going to do the right thing because it is the right thing. And I appreciate, Cory Booker really being a lead on gun safety, gun advocacy, and I appreciate Kamala Harris coming out in support of the mandatory buyback as well. All these other candidates have really come out, but, I 100% am behind Beto because he is the first candidate without any doubt in his mind. He came out the first day that the peace plan was announced and he endorsed it. And that action
Absolutely.
is just that to me is what this country needs right now. And we saw that after his hell yes moment at the debate, mandatory buybacks became more popular. It was at 51% in support of mandatory buybacks, and now it's at 59%, and that's leadership.
Yeah, and the argument I've heard is that while mandatory buybacks may have less majority support than voluntary buybacks, the moments that Beto has proven that when somebody comes out to lead on something, that can shape public opinion. So if we are making the argument that voluntary buybacks are more popular, well, we've shown that the stance on mandatory is malleable. So why not keep pushing for that? And again, not trimming our sails and saying what is right.
Of course, and we just saw, like Moms Demand Action, Every Town, March for Our Lives. These are all very, in the relative scheme of things, very new movements that have come up in support of plans like these, and the impact that they have made in just these few past years, it's amazing. It to me shows that this is a national conversation that needs to be had, and by pushing the envelope with someone that's willing to get on stage and say this is the right thing, we're going to do the right thing, I think that that's what it takes to shape public opinion, like you were saying, and to really decide for the American public once and for all where we stand on these issues.
Right.
Well, Jared, so that's kind of my spiel on gun safety reform. Anything in particular that you want to talk about as well?
Um, hmm. I guess you know this past these past 2 months, and this isn't necessarily about gun safety. This is more about Beto himself. Um, and these past 2 months, he has had two mass shootings in his home state. I can't imagine how difficult that would be. And it's going back to what you said, how, before El Paso, Beto was not for, he was for a voluntary buyback system. And he himself admitted that he took that position because it was the more politically popular position. And the comments I've seen made towards him, like the reception of his response to El Paso was almost universally positive on the Democratic side. He held himself so well, and he really stood out as a leader. But I've heard the criticism here, and Cory Booker raised this criticism that it took El Paso and the tragedy that happened there for Beto to be pushed to that line. And I just want to know what your thoughts on that. Do you consider it a beneficial quality that that a candidate um when something very personal happens to them and to the people around them, do you find it to be a beneficial quality that they change positions to fit with their new uh beliefs, even at the expense of being labeled a flip-flopper, or being or as I heard from the Republican side, uh politicizing a tragedy for your own gain? Do you think that is more of a beneficial trait, especially in a candidate like Beto?
Well, okay. So, I think that your question comes down to two parts. So I will address the first one first, which is it all right to politicize a tragedy, or is this even in the politicization of a tragedy? And I will say that it is not all right to take the wishes of those that have been slain in vain, and to let them, just rest, or rather not rest with nothing happening. We saw what happened in Sandy Hook, how many years back now, and nothing has been done. We don't have these laws passed that, just to me and to so many other Americans, are just smart, and we didn't really have the push then, and now we do. But the fact of the matter is that, for me personally, and this is my opinion, I'm not sure about yours. If I were to be shot in a mass shooting, if I were to be killed in a mass shooting, or if I were to be um, just killed by a shooter, in general, I would want my death to be politicized, and I would want that to be used and as part of the conversation to push these reforms that would stop future people like me from getting gunned down. And I think that those Hispanics that were
It,
gunned down in El Paso, for me personally, just the fact that that happened, the fact that that was possible in this country, is horrifying. It really is.
Absolutely. And I,
Um,
I, I've said the same thing. If I die in a mass shooting, I want you to put my body in a cardboard box and drop it on Mitch McConnell's doorstep. Uh,
but yeah, I don't think that I don't think it's bad to to attempt to prevent another tragedy from occurring. People say that you're politicizing a tragedy, but the fact of the matter is that tragedies are already political enough. You already have so much rhetoric. You see whenever there's a push for gun reform, that gun sales go up, right? And that's not just across the board, like normal, like every American gets a new gun, right? It's predominantly the Americans that already own guns that are stockpiling more guns, right? And so the fact of the matter is that I don't think that's wrong. But when it comes to Canada, like Beto, I know that he came here to Iowa, and on a lighter note, right, or well, relatively lighter note to the immediate results of a mass shooting and what that entails. Beto came here to discuss climate change with Iowan farmers because Iowan farmers are being just completely almost eviscerated by climate change. You know, we have huge floods, we have droughts. Are the cycles for just crops is just completely out of whack, and of course, we have the trade wars now that are also hurting Iowan farmers. But Beto, he came to Iowa and he discussed his climate change policy with Iowan farmers, and they told him specifically that there are some things that they did not like about his policy. This is before what happened in El Paso. This is before all of that. And he changed his policy, but he changed his policy because he realized that his policy wasn't doing enough for people right now and wasn't what America needed right now. And I think that he simply just took that same mindset of, I need to be the best leader that I can be, and I need to, represent all of America to the fullest extent that I can, and be the servant the servant leader that I can be. And he applied it with El Paso because El Paso is his home, and the fact that he had to console survivors in the hospital, and that he had so many people come up to him and tell him, like, we want you to fight for us. And I don't know if you've seen the town hall where, and I believe it was Denver, Colorado, where some Aurora survivors were telling him, promise me that you will fight no matter if you lose. And Beto said, I will fight so long as I have breath in my body for you guys, right? And
Right.
that's who Beto is. He's someone that he had this life-changing experience. We saw the addresses right after what happened in El Paso. He had tears in his eyes, and you could really see that he was mourning, and he was deeply saddened and changed by it. And he went immediately back to El Paso, canceled all the events, the Iowa State Fair, which is one of the biggest events for any candidate in the primaries. And he decided, what, I'm going to do what's right because it is the right thing to do. And the fact that he decided to be the voice for El Paso, for Hispanics, and for all those that can't speak now because they have their voices forever silenced, I think that is really admirable, and I respect him more for it.
I completely agree. I found it to be a very I found his response and his shift in policy to be actually more moving than anything else, because it shows his emotional capacity to feel and reflect on tragedy, that he is willing, no matter what the political expense, that he's willing to say, I was wrong on this policy and I want to change that. And I find that to be more impressive than anything. And I was very much pleased with both Beto's response and his I hate using the word shifting, but his shift in policy. So I completely agree with what you said.
And I do think that it is unfortunate that it required Beto to have that tragedy happen and hit so close to home. But I think that it also put him in the perspective that so many students have in March for Our Lives have, that so many moms demand action have. It really just opened his eyes to the perspective that these activist groups have, that they have had friends that have been affected by gun violence. And I think that as a nation, us choosing not to act after the tragedy at Sandy Hook, the tragedy at Parkland, all these tragedies that have happened time and time again, and we've become so desensitized. I think that it really did take a huge shock for Beto in order to finally get him to realize we can't be doing politics as usual, that we need to be leading on these issues and we need to change the narrative entirely. And I'm grateful that it happened for him. I hope that it happens. I hope that more candidates wake up and realize that it's not about the polls, it's about leading on the issues and doing what's right.
Yeah, and I think that really shows, the capacity for leadership, that he's not stuck in his views. He's willing to consider other options, and in this case, in the event of the very personal thing that happened to him, he found that he in his mind there was no other option, and I found that very admirable, and I found that to be a very telling aspect of his capacity for leadership.
Um, so I think that we're kind of nearing more towards where we should cut this off. So for me personally, I think that what we should be talking about now is just kind of like our own personal experiences. You've been volunteering for a while now. I know that you had that really bad experience a couple months back now. But just overall, what do you think about the campaign in its current state?
You know, despite we no matter how much we support Beto, almost all of us recognize that his numbers are not the greatest right now, at least on paper. But I believe that regardless if he wins or loses, Beto's way of campaigning and Beto's way of reaching out to the American people, I think, should be the future of campaigning and politics. Just sitting down, or in Beto's case, on occasion, standing on top of a table, and and speaking directly to people, and not just in a giant stadium, not just in front of the White House, but in coffee shops, in high schools and colleges. That way of reaching out to people, I think, is so innovative and so important. I think, again, regardless if we win or loses, Beto is campaigning the right way. Uh, so despite the numbers at the moment, and even then, I doubt those numbers because I've seen his crowds. They're definitely not small, but I think, despite the hardships we might be going through right now, win or lose, Beto has changed the way we candidates campaign, and the way I believe they should be campaigning. So I'm very happy with what they're doing right now. Would I like to see some movement on paper and polls? Sure, but I've got faith that they're doing the right thing. you know it's just like Better said many times, this is our moment to change America, and I think he's doing it the right way.
Well, so I'll give my 2 cents here, and then I think we'll close it out. But for me personally, I'm on the ground here in Iowa. I've been here on the ground for Beto now for a very long time. I think I was reached out to in May, so like very late May. So I've been campaigning here for him for a very long time. But what I've seen a group of people that look like America. And, at the steak fry, we had Latinos, we had African Americans, we had Asian Americans, we had all these groups of people that, are kind of just put to the side. And, obviously, yeah, some white guys too. So
Hi.
yeah, yeah, right. But we had a group of people that looked like America, and it was numerous. It was amazing. But what really struck out to me is the fact that other campaigns. I'm gonna call out two that I saw doing this personally. Warren and Buttigieg. They had bust in supporters to the steak fry, and that's not to discount the fact that they had that support, right? Because they did have that support. But I do think that it says something that people, working people, took time out of their day to come to the steak fry, to support Beto, to on their own whim make it out to the steak fry for Beto to see him speak, and that it was all of us getting there by ourselves. And that to me speaks volumes as to the support that Beto has behind him,
Absolutely.
and also speaks volumes to see the effect that Beto has. And, here in Iowa, a bunch of people are going to say, oh, look at the polls. Beto's super behind, or like, we have our front runners, this and that. I will say that I've called people for hours and hours and hours. I've called almost exclusively landlines. I've called almost exclusively cell phones. I've called time and time again. And, most of the time people don't pick up, period, which is great. But the fact of the matter is that those that do pick up, it's almost always just, oh, well, it's a little too early. I'm still looking into the candidates, or I haven't been paying attention to politics recently, or oh, I really like your guy, but I'm undecided, and that's just kind of the general tide right now here in Iowa. And on the doors, it's the same thing. I have knocked 2 packets almost every weekend since I started, and if not more, 3 packets, 4 packets. I go crazy with it a little bit sometimes, but the fact of the matter is that every conversation that I've had, everything that I've seen here in Iowa personally, is not indicative of any one front runner. Yes, we have, Iowa City, which is obviously predominantly liberal. If you've never been there, Jared, I'm not sure. And, for whoever sees this, Iowa City is a predominantly liberal city. It's campus city. It's very nice, very beautiful. But so you can really draw huge crowds for liberal candidates, right?
Right.
And so, obviously, a lot of Democrats go there. They're like, okay, we're going to draw a huge crowd. But Beto has shown time and time again that he has support, not just in the most liberal parts of Iowa City, but to me has shown that he has supports in even the most rural parts of Iowa, period. And, that's just from the conversations that I've had in the Independence Day Parade in Independence, Iowa. There was 2 main camps there, 2 main campaigns there, and it was Beto O'Rourke's campaign and Biden's campaign. And obviously, Biden is the perceived front runner right now, or argued that's Elizabeth Warren. But Biden's camp was, at least from what I can recall, smaller than Beto's campaign presence.
Hell yeah.
And that was in a rural part of Iowa. That was in an Iowa and an Independence Day parade that featured a Trump float, that featured a lot of Republican floats, and yet Beto was there in force, with presence, with people coming out, having conversations with them, and him sitting there listening to people. And I think that to me shows, like, yes, the polls are important. Obviously, it's what's gonna get us to qualify or not qualify. But I think that also just like looking at the people factor of it, Beto has shown time and time again that no matter what happens, he's gonna fight for America and fight for the soul of this country. And I, for one, am so glad that he is willing to do that and put his life in servitude for that.
Absolutely.
So I think that's it for this sort of podcast format. Definitely new, but I really enjoyed it. I don't know about you, Jared.
I'd be totally down. I think this turned out very well. I'd be more than happy to do this again when I have time.
Of course. Well, yeah. So this is Gio, Jared, obviously, and I think that's all for right now.
All right.
Okay. And let's disconnect.